In a field in southern Germany, in 1983, a construction crew hit bone while digging a drainage ditch. Not one bone, dozens. What they'd uncovered was a pit containing the remains of 34 people, men, women, and children, as young as infants, all buried together all at once, roughly 7,000 years ago. At first, archaeologists assumed it was some kind of ancient cemetery. Then they looked closer. Every skull had been caved in, and almost none of the skeletons showed the kind of injuries you'd expect from a fight. No defensive wounds on the arms or hands. These people hadn't fought back. Most of them had been struck down from behind or while running. This place would later be called the Talheim Death Pit. For years, archaeologists treated it as one horrifying, isolated incident. A single bad day, 7,000 years ago. They were wrong. It wasn't isolated at all. It was one piece of something much bigger, and the rest of that puzzle wasn't buried in the dirt. It was hiding inside every one of us, written into our DNA. Here's where the story gets strange. Scientists studying human genetics noticed something odd in the Y chromosome. The piece of DNA passed only from father to son, virtually unchanged, generation after generation. Somewhere around 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, the diversity of that chromosome collapsed dramatically, as if the vast majority of male family lines on Earth had simply stopped, all around the same time. Normally, when researchers see a genetic collapse like this, they check whether it lines up with something environmental, a famine, a disease, a climate shift. Those events tend to kill indiscriminately. Men, women, children, all affected roughly equally. But when they checked mitochondrial DNA passed only from mother to child, there was no matching collapse. Women's lineages carried on almost undisturbed, generation after generation, as if nothing had happened. Something had wiped out enormous numbers of men specifically, while leaving women largely untouched. And by some estimates, this wasn't a small dip. It was a collapse so severe that for every 20 men who might have existed, only one line survived to pass on his DNA to the present day. To put that in perspective, no war in recorded history comes close to that kind of loss, by percentage. Not World War I, not World War II. If something on that scale happened to the modern world, you wouldn't be looking at millions of casualties. You'd be looking at billions, something close to 4 billion men gone, with only a couple 100 million left standing.
If you're enjoying this, subscribe, because what caused this collapse turns out to connect directly back to that pit in Germany, and to places even worse. Talheim wasn't unique, it was a pattern. Not far away, in Austria, archaeologists found another mass grave, this one holding the remains of roughly 200 people, dumped together after what looks like a raid on a settlement protected by wooden palisades. Same story, men and older individuals, but almost no young women, as if they hadn't been killed at all. As if they'd been taken. That detail, young women conspicuously missing from the dead, shows up again and again at these sites. It's one of the eeriest patterns in the entire Neolithic record. And at this particular site, something else was different too. Many of the bodies were missing their arms and legs, with skulls found separated entirely from the rest of the remains. Whatever happened here didn't end when the victims died. Further south, in what's now Spain, researchers examined the remains of over 3,000 individuals from this era, and found that nearly a quarter showed signs of violent trauma, sharp force wounds, blunt force fractures, healed and unhealed alike. Almost all of the unhealed injuries belong to adult and teenage males, which tells you something chilling on its own. For the men of this world, surviving one violent encounter didn't mean you were safe. It just meant you'd survive long enough to face another one. And these numbers, as horrifying as they are likely an undercount. Researchers point out that many forms of fatal violence, strangulation, poisoning, a blow that kills without breaking bone, leave no trace on a skeleton at all. Whatever the true death toll was, the bones we found are only a fraction of it. But the worst of these sites, the one that made even hardened archaeologists uneasy, sits at a place called Herxheim. Here, archaeologists didn't find a massacred village. They found something closer to a slaughterhouse. Outside a small settlement, dozens of pits had been dug and filled with human remains over 1,000 individuals, based on current estimates, ranging from newborns to the elderly. The bodies weren't just killed, they were processed. Skulls split open in a consistent pattern, along the same line, over and over. Long bones cracked for their marrow, tongues removed. Certain parts of the body, the hands, specific bones known to carry more nutritional value, show bite marks. Some remains show signs of having been cooked, even spit roasted. And when it was all over, some of the bones were shaped into cups, tools, or ornaments, some apparently displayed near the settlement entrance. Researchers now believe the people who lived here weren't the victims. They were the ones doing this, to outsiders brought in from communities dozens, even hundreds of kilometers away. Isotope analysis on the bones shows some victims grew up eating a hunter-gatherer diet, others a farming diet, some in the mountains, some in the lowlands. This wasn't one raid on one nearby village. It was systematic, and it reached far. A community of maybe 50 people orchestrating something on that scale against strangers from distant lands. Whatever was happening in this period, it wasn't random chaos. It took organization, planning. And apparently, it was worth the effort. So the question becomes, why? Why did the world seem to turn this violent, all at roughly the same time, across cultures that had barely any contact with each other? The leading explanation ties back to something that had just changed everything about how humans lived: farming. Right before this period, much of humanity shifted from small, mobile hunter-gatherer bands into permanent farming settlements. That shift meant more food, more people, more stored surplus. It also meant, for the first time in human history, something worth stealing and worth defending: grain stores, livestock, fixed land, and a fixed population you could raid instead of chase. Settlements began organizing along family lines, with related men banding together for mutual protection and advantage. Trust ran along bloodlines, and outsiders, including neighboring settlements, only a short walk away, increasingly looked less like potential allies and more like threats or targets. In that kind of world, an entire male lineage could be erased in a single raid, while the surviving women were absorbed into the winning group, their descendants carrying only the victor's Y chromosome forward. Do that enough times, across enough generations, across a large enough portion of the old world, and you get exactly what shows up in the DNA today: a genetic record permanently reshaped by mass violence. Not every scientist agrees violence was the whole story, though. Some argue that, as these family groups multiplied and split apart over generations, certain male lines simply died out on their own, no massacre required. Just the slow mathematics of which family lines happened to expand and which quietly faded. Some clans grew, split into new settlements, and thrived. Others struggled against poor harvests or disease and eventually disappeared, taking their lineage with them. It's entirely possible both explanations were happening at once: brutal violence tearing through some regions, quiet demographic decline unfolding in others, both contributing to the same global genetic pattern. What's not up for debate is the physical evidence. The pits are real, the wounds are real, and for the people living through it, survival into adulthood was itself an achievement. With no armor beyond animal hide or woven cloth, and weapons ranging from stone axes and adzes to bows, clubs, and spears, most people in this era didn't live past their early 30s, one of the shortest average lifespans in the entire span of human history, even accounting for how common infant mortality already was. Eventually, this era of near-constant local slaughter did fade, not because humans became kinder overnight, but because societies grew larger and more complex. Trade and diplomacy started replacing raids as the default way of dealing with neighbors, and warfare itself became more organized, more distant, and, paradoxically, statistically less likely to touch any single person directly. It would take thousands of years and 2 world wars before humanity began trending toward the relative peace most of us take for granted today, and even now. That peace is only about a century old. But for a few thousand years, in the earliest farming villages of the ancient world, walking up to a stranger's settlement could get your entire bloodline erased from history, every trace of you, gone within a generation. Except for one place it couldn't be erased from: the DNA of everyone who came after.